share my screen, I find that sometimes I can't see the chat bar or your faces or your names. So just in case that happens, our lovely host will give me a shout. I've not seen anything pop up in the chat, so I'm going to assume that you can hear me as well, which is always a good place to start.
We can.
Perfect. Be a very strange session otherwise. So I am here today to talk to you about AI and creativity. Before I get started, I'll just give you a little bit of context about, I guess, who I am, why I'm here. I have happily been kind of part of the AmplifyFE community since COVID times, when we all spent lots of times online. They were one of the many communities I found online and kind of tagged along to. I think this is my second or third workshop or community space that I've held with AmplifyFE, so you may have seen me before. But my background is in art, so I am an art teacher, I guess, by trade, artist, teacher. I'm also a researcher, so I'm really interested in teacher identity, particularly in further education. And I guess my specialism is adult education because I've been working in there for about 10 years. So I use a lot of creativity because I am predominantly delivering art courses, but I also teach on things like digital marketing. And very recently, I've also started teaching on teacher education as well. So even if you're not an art teacher, there'll probably be things here, tools, tips, tricks that you'll be able to use in different spaces, because I know I definitely kind of use them outside of the art classroom as well as inside the art classroom as we go along. So obviously AI is evolving continuously. So I made this presentation last week. It may be out of date by now, who knows? But it's always good to keep an eye out. Everything that I have used within this presentation as well in terms of AI tools are the free versions. So working in adult education in particular, we often have very small budgets. We can't be buying everyone licenses to various different AI tools. It'd be very expensive, and our courses would have to cost lots and lots of money. So yeah, all done on free versions. But of course, if you find a tool that you particularly enjoy, you might treat yourself and indulge in the paid option. I use AI quite a lot in my teaching, but also in my planning, in my research, and in my personal life as well. I found it a really useful tool. I've embraced it. I'm probably like an early adapter. It's a term that they usually like to throw around. But I've never paid for any AI platform. I find that the free versions are just as well. They allow me to do everything I want them to do. I don't know if they're just as effective because I have no benchmark to, I guess, measure it up against. So it'd be interesting to hear, perhaps toward the end of the session, people's experiences with paid versus free versions of software. We also have to consider things around safety with AI as well. If you're from an institution, you may have different barriers, firewalls against different AI platforms. Different places that I work and teach have different guidelines. So at the moment, I am literally in the office of an ACL building at an away day, and we are a Microsoft Office organisation. So we use Copilot at work, and with our students, they have access to it through their student accounts, and everything else is blocked. So we can't use any other AI tools here. I also teach the teacher education course, and where I teach that, they fully embrace AI, and you can pretty much access anything ChatGPT. It's all open, the firewalls are not up, and you can use it. So just something to bear in mind. If you see something that interests you, you might be able to use it on your home computer, and then you might get to work and find that it doesn't work. I certainly have had that when I've been planning courses historically, where I've gone, oh, this will be a really good session. And then I get onto my work laptop and I can't access the website that I'd planned the session around as you go. So just those things to bear in mind. So throughout the session, I am going to predominantly talk about the role of AI in art education, but I will try and expand on that and suggest perhaps how you might use that in different contexts and not creative education as I go. I'm going to demonstrate some practical strategies for bringing that AI into the creative workflow. There's lots of debates around it, lots of fear perhaps from artists and creatives about AI replacing us. And often, at least in my algorithms, I see memes about, well, we don't want AI to make art, we want AI to be able to do the dishes. But I'm going to hopefully show you how it can be a really useful tool to engage learners that perhaps don't yet have skill sets that they want to have, or who are perhaps just interested in digital art versus more traditional outcomes. And I'm going to think about how actually it can unlock new forms of creativity and how it might challenge traditional barriers. So I always use drawing as an example. If someone hasn't developed the skills to be able to draw in the way that they wish to, or in a representational way, but they want to express their ideas, they could find that as a real barrier to helping them express their ideas, because they just get caught up on not necessarily having that skill set yet. So we can look at that together as well. So aim 1 then, explore the evolving role of AI in art education. This is obviously continuously evolving because we get more AI tools as we go along, but it can aid digital art making, but it can also aid traditional art making as well. And I think that's a really important thing. This doesn't have to just be about AI courses. It doesn't just have to be about digital art courses. And as I said, it doesn't even just have to be about art courses. You might be teaching something like science and you want to be able to draw a plant that has been dissected with all the different layers and how everything works within there. So if you can't draw, that might be a challenge, but if you can harness AI, it can be really good. So in terms of reshaping practice, then, as I say, drawing is my go-to example. This is Canva. I am absolutely in love with Canva. It's probably one of my favorite things. I use it. I do a lot of freelance digital marketing work, and I use it for that as well. Just the free version. But they introduced sometime last year kind of this sketch to life AI function. So you can draw very crude sketches and then you click generate and it comes up with these fully illustrated, full color pictures, reimaginings of what you've drawn. So we done this within an art class where we were talking about how you might see your ideas, your sketches come to life, particularly if people struggle with that imaginative thinking or forward planning, or perhaps they're thinking about turning a drawing into a painting and they don't know what colours to pick. But also for learners that don't have that technical level of drawing skill, they're able to put some marks on a page and then see what happened when they clicked create. As with all kind of generative AI, they can do this over and over again and it should give them a different result each time. A limitation that we found with the Canva sketch to life is that your sketch actually disappears once you press generate. So if you did want to generate a different clown, maybe you wanted one that looked friendlier or creepier, I don't know, all clowns are relatively creepy to me, you would have to redraw your version of a clown each time. So that felt like a little bit of a limitation. Learners got a little bit fatigued with that. But were not necessarily happy with the first result they got. We also were working on computers with a mouse, which might be limiting when you're drawing. Because if you think about the natural drawing skill, you wouldn't draw kind of necessarily with your finger unless you were drawing on a tablet, perhaps. So it did limit their functionality. Whereas if you are in the position to have drawing tablets and digital pens, or even a laptop with a tracker pad, that might make that process a little smoother for learners, and they'll be able to add in more details as they go along. You can also, it's not captured on these screenshots, provide a description to your sketch too. So with the stars, they didn't necessarily just have to draw the stars. They could then have written underneath, a night sky, or they could have said, neon pink, just to give the AI a little bit more to work with. So this was brilliant for them. Canva, if you haven't used it already, is relatively logical to navigate. Learners were able to sign up, in my instance, with either they signed up with their learner email addresses, or they could sign up with their personal email addresses if they wanted to continue using it beyond the course. And then people found that it was quite similar in its functionality to PowerPoint, which perhaps people might be more likely to have experience with than Canva. So it was a good gateway to Canva for them, because then we could look at things like creating specific templates for different social media, or posters, and they could also think about practicalities of digital artwork. So if they wanted to print this off, this is going to give them really high res images, which they can then print really, really big. They could put it on the side of a bus if they wanted to. Whereas if you kind of generate these perhaps with a different AI tool, they would just give you kind of a JPEG, and it would probably be like 92 DPI, which is quite small and become quite pixelated after you've downloaded it. So it gave them scope to really expand that digital practice. But likewise, they could also use it to develop their traditional art skills, because then they could think, okay, I've got my composition, I've got my colours, I know what I'm aiming for. I can print that image off, take it back to the art room and paint from it directly. So again, this is an art context. The sketch doesn't have to be something that is going to be turned into a piece of artwork. You could be sketching an idea for a diagram or an icon or an image or something that's going to help you. Particularly in my research, I use quite a lot of visual aids because I like pictures and diagrams to explain things. So I could use something like this to help me. Or if you're, I don't know, setting up a business or a company and you need a logo, you could use that, sketch your design in and then see what Canva comes up with. So also in terms of reshaping creative practice, we looked at the idea of collaborative working. So this is, again, a really transferable skill set for learners, because they might be in jobs or go into jobs where they've got to work in a team. They've got to work on shared documents, might not be art-based, but they've got to do that, got to work with others. And with Canva, you can really embrace that collaborative working. You can see the picture on the screen, and this is something that 6 learners worked on together. They were all on their own computers. I told them they were not allowed to talk to each other, so we had a eerily quiet classroom, and they're all on their computers. They could leave notes within Canva to each other, so they could communicate. They could just delete each other's work as well, which they thought was quite, funny. It gave them quite a lot of power. These are adult learners that I'm talking about as well, so most of them retired after long careers. So they had to rethink about how they were working. Some people were just making decisions and changes about communicating with the rest of their peers, and obviously that was frustrating for their peers whose work was getting deleted as they went along, so they had to work out how to work together. They had to pick a theme as well. At this point in history, I had just passed my driving test and I needed a new car. So they decided that that was going to be the theme of their collaborative project, as they're going to find me a car, and they made this little PowerPoint. I'm not sure if the lightning and the helicopter are good or bad omens for my future driving. But yeah, they were able to figure out things together as well. So if someone wanted to make a picture bigger, but they didn't know how to, they could pop it in the chat and someone else could kind of action that as they went along. We also talked about other tools that would let them work collaboratively. So again, Microsoft Office, particularly the online tools, you can invite people to shared Word documents, shared PowerPoints, and they had a little play with that as well. So that was useful for them in terms of perhaps using a more real life relevant tool that they might find in lots of different jobs and different career paths. And they were able to think about how they would collaboratively edit things like text rather than collaboratively build something like a picture. And that is something that they went on to do in the course as well. They were able to, of course, all be using AI within these as well to kind of check their work and see what was going on. They could put their own sketches in, they could import their own pictures. So quite a lot that they could do, and it reshaped their creative practice, because most of them hadn't worked collaboratively before, particularly in an art context where they had to think about other people's thoughts and opinions and emotions, and creative visions as well. So if you have an idea what PowerPoint slide or a Canva page is going to look like, and you've got 5 other people to work with, how do you do that successfully? They also were able to do collaborative, creative problem solving, because literally I did just sit in the corner of the room while they all worked in silence collaboratively to work it all out themselves as they went along. So aiding digital art making, then this was brilliant for all sorts of reasons. Within most of the art courses that I deliver, they tend to be art, drawing, and painting, or they will very much be very hands-on, away from the computer subjects. So digital art is a new thing that we kind of offer every now and then for those people that are interested in it. But it's about finding that balance between different skill sets and what people can do kind of on their own and what they can do with our help and support and with the support of AI as well. So for this, we played with quite a lot of different tools, but I've kind of picked my three favourites as we go. So in the class, I tend to have people that are able to navigate a computer but hadn't really touched AI or digital art making before. So it was again really looking for how we could bring in their knowledge from the classroom and their traditional art making into that digital space. So the first thing we looked at was more traditional components. So we looked at composition. So if you're not from an art background, that is basically where things are. And we think about all sorts of things like hierarchy of information. And if anyone's from a graphic design background, you'll know about that in terms of text. And you have your heading, your subheading, and then smaller headings, and then bodies of text. With paintings and drawings and other things, that's kind of the same idea. So what do you want your audience person to see first? What do you want them to see next? What do you want them to see last? So they were able to think about those things digitally without having to worry about drawing those items, because they could just bring the image in that they've created or they've had AI create, or if they've just found it on kind of a Creative Commons licensed website with pictures. So they can just think about the technical art term and how to apply it. We also think about splitting the page into thirds. So you have kind of the top, middle, and bottom going up to down and from left to right. So with this example here, she was really thinking about having her birds in that top third, having the trees and this shed or house in that middle third, and then having her sheep and these flowers in the bottom third. So it was really useful to quickly do it. And because Canva has that sharing ability, I was able to keep an eye on everyone's canvas from my computer, but also obviously I could wander around as well and see what they were doing. So I could show them, okay, you've thought about putting that there. Maybe, what happens if we move it here? Do you think that's better? Does it feel worse? And they could also then share it with their peers to get instant feedback as well. And you can move things around. And I would be able to add notes to this to, go, okay, you've really thought about the top, middle, and bottom, but have you thought about the far left, centre, and far right? Is that balanced in the same way? So that is kind of, I think, my love letter to Canva. I'm not sure, I don't remember if I mentioned it anymore, but if you haven't tried it already, sign up for free, have a play, really good. Microsoft Copilot, or another one that they were able to use on site, so that was great. And this learner was thinking about transformations, and she wanted to be able to generate lots and lots of ideas really quickly before she headed back to, paper and pencil to sketch her ideas out. So she put prompts into Copilot and asked it to create these images. And then she just got playful and asked them to create different iterations. I'm not sure how she got to seals, but that obviously happened. But she was very much thinking about that transformation from one identity to another, and how subtle she wanted that to be, or how many iterations she wanted there to be between the beginning and the end. As she went along. So she found it really useful to generate a lot of ideas much quicker than she would if she was relying on sketching out all of her ideas. So time saving, which probably important for all of us as we go along in life. And then Pixar, if you've not used that before, it's a little bit like a very basic version of Photoshop is normally what I think about it as. So I gave all my learners this top image and told them to change it, essentially. It was a bit of an initial assessment. We got them all logged on. And then I just said, play with the tools and see if you can change the image. And as you can see, very successfully managed to change the image and also added their own image in there as well. So, when you've got these sites that are approved and safe, you don't have to talk people through things step by step. Introduce some of the simpler tools first, like Canva, like Copilot, and then by the time you get to something that's a little bit more complicated, they've built those digital skills up themselves to be able to figure out where things should be logically in the toolbar. And they also, because they'd built their trust in Copilot, felt confident to ask Copilot how to do it rather than kind of, putting their hand up or sending me an email waiting for me to come round everyone. They were able to use that problem solving themselves and rely on each other because they'd built up those collaborative skills as they go. So implications, obviously, if we're going to do something, we want to know if it is doing anything, collecting the evidence and seeing how it goes for them. So at the start of all of the digital courses specifically, I asked learners these kinds of questions. I asked them to pick one initially because I didn't want to overwhelm. And once they felt that they met that objective, so for example, if they've used technology to digitally enhance their artwork, oh yeah, I've done that because I turned my sketch of a creepy clown into a picture of a creepy clown. They can then move on and think about understanding how to use prompts effectively within AI. So moving from giving AI visual information from their sketches to giving it textual information to create visuals. And they might move on to that as they go. It also gives each learner a nice individualized learning path because they might not all pick the same objectives at the same time because they're going to have different priorities as they go along. So practical strategies then for AI in creative work. Here we go. So tools can provoke experimentation because it's much quicker and responsive. Learners are able to really adapt. I do mention Canva again. I'm sure, yeah, probably comes up even more so. So this learner, I'm going to press play. This learner dabbled in moving image, which is something that they would never have thought of doing had they been sat up a table. We do a week in traditional art courses on stop motion, but that's very, very time consuming and most of them get quite bored. They like the outcome, but they don't like the work that's involved. So this, with Canva, magic AI tool, you can animate within seconds. He was rethinking the railway children and what they might look like now. In 2024. So again, really expanding ideas. Space men have landed. There are rockets. Really living in the future there. And Microsoft Designer. So again, if you're a Microsoft Office company or institution, this is great. Microsoft Designer. You can just really play around with it. This learner wanted to reimagine her childhood, I guess, looking at school buses. And as you can see from the description, she was playing with her iPad here rather than a desktop computer. And she was quite pleased that it was ready to post on Instagram because it was formatted in the right shape to be put on her Instagram feed. So she was able to play with these ideas, layer memories very, very quickly. Most of the experimentation and the permission to experiment for my adult learners came down to the fact that it was very quick and that they could do it on their phone or an iPad. So if they were, watching TV of an evening, they could do it. So process-led exploration as well, back to Copilot. Had a learner that had a great conversation with AI about a vegetarian tiger who went on holiday, and AI just takes everything to the most logical conclusion. So it was talking about, well, this AI tiger is going to have dental surgery. You're probably going to have stomach issues, so you might want to get him a GI doctor to deal with those. And was really experimenting with this generative aspect, but actually found that quite limiting because every time they generated a tiger, the tiger looked different. So he wasn't able to use these images in a way he wanted to because he wanted to create a story, and you wouldn't expect your tiger to look different on every page of your story. So it was good to see them being critical about the tools that they were using, but then also thinking about more traditional art skills again. So if you tiger on holiday is too far for you, we also thought about colour theory and how can you create a colour wheel that doesn't involve mixing paint? Can you find the colour wheel in nature and using image searches to help them with that as they went along, and then thinking about how they might arrange those on a page or how they might use them going forward. And again, there's golden threads all through this, expanding the learner's visual and conceptual vocabularies. I've talked about composition, I've talked about colour mixing. Microsoft Designer, they're able to think about different styles of artwork. So they could think about wanting to do portraits, but what style portrait do they want to do? Do they want Art Deco? Do they want Victorian? Do they want simplistic or complex? So it lets you do that. and Pixar let you do that as well. So they were able to say here, see, the prompt was a 14th century historical 2D portrait of a female warrior. So it's able to take all of those prompts on board as you go. So it's really useful for them to do a bit of research too, particularly with the AI. They found that sometimes it got it wrong. So then they could feed back into AI and go, the image you've created isn't in the correct style. This style is more associated with bright colours or geometric shapes or whatever it may be. So they're able to draw on their own knowledge to also educate AI. Again, really keeping them active rather than as passive users of AI that are just accepting everything that is going on around them. So how can we unlock barriers and challenges as we go? We can disrupt, enhance, and reframe essentially. So challenge those traditional models. Art doesn't just have to be drawings and paintings. We can think about skill hierarchies. So people might have great ideas, but not be able to put them down on paper. With AI, that allows them to. It gives them more options and more ways of getting their ideas across. We can think about how we mark work. So do we just base it on skill set, or do we look at the conceptual ideas behind work as well? But we do need to think about inequalities. So particularly in lockdown, I think this was highlighted. Does everyone have access to tech? Does every institution have access to AI? Are they blocked on your systems? All of those sorts of things that might stop people from accessing it. How can we enhance? I think it is really about that speeding up ideas. There's less fear of failure because it took them 30 seconds to create, so they didn't put 30 hours into it and now they're going, I don't like it. They're going, oh, that prompt didn't work. How can I change my prompt next time so that it works well? We can expand the way that they are communicating. They can use text, sound, image to generate these ideas, so we can support all modes of learning for them as they go along. And they can also think about higher levels of learning as well, and how they are wording their prompts, if they're getting what they want out of them, how they can be critical of AI as they go. So reframing then, really thinking about the product versus process, and if we want someone that can paint something that's really realistic, or if we want someone that can think critically, thinking about the assessment criteria as we go along, thinking about the ethics of AI as well. So when they were creating images, they noticed that it would predominantly create images of white men, and getting them to question that. We had a whole session on the ethics of AI in the courses that I do. We spend a whole week thinking about it so that they can really be critical and not just accept things and biases, and thinking about, well, who programmed AI? Where's it getting its information from? Is it always right? So they can question those things as they go along. In terms of curriculum design, of course, that beds the IT throughout, but it also does develop, like literacy skills, English skills, because they're thinking about writing prompts, they're thinking about communication, and they're thinking about the competencies as well, and how they might then take those beyond. So while you may not need to develop a vegetarian tiger to take to work with you, it might be useful if you're making a poster for the charity coffee event that's happening. Just some examples of what I just talked about, that kind of bias in the AI. These were their initial outcomes from 4 different learners when they put in very similar prompts across Adobe Firefly, and as we can see, they all look very similar. So we questioned that, reworded our prompts, tried to get some diversity in there as we were going through. We also used shared PowerPoints to collate our thoughts on the ethics and authorship and innovation, so they were able to work collaboratively, do some research, and put in everything that they thought was important to consider as they went through. So that is a bit of a whistle-stop tour. I'm more than happy to answer any questions. I realise I've gone up right to the wire, but my email address is there, so if you have something that you don't have time to chat about now, I'm more than happy to answer questions over email.
Abbie, we had one question in the chat already from Simon. When watching Canva groups work, can we see what everyone is inputting, like say when a live microboard digital whiteboard is happening?
Yeah, really good question, Simon. So you can see the live action, but once they stop moving the thing that they are moving, their initials do disappear, which I did find a little bit frustrating. But if you're watching it all unfold, their initials appear. Yeah, but once it is completed, you can't see. The way you could come around that if you need to know, kind of equity of work and responsibility, is you could always record your screen, do a screen grab or record so that you can see the process and then you can see who's engaging. But also hopefully they'd be using the notes section to communicate with each other or comments, so you might be able to get a feel, because it might be one person saying, say Abbie isn't moving anything, doesn't look like she's contributing, but actually she's really busy in the chat bar going, the composition isn't right, move that to the left, blah, blah, blah. Because people might have different skill sets. Yeah, but I would say screen recording would be the best way to record everything that's going on. Brilliant, thank you so much. I don't see any other questions. But like I say, hopefully you captured my email. If not, I'm sure the team can pass it on to you, and more than happy to chat further about these ideas. Are there anyone?
Perfect. If you're happy for me to, I'm going to stop the recording now.
Lovely, thank you so much.